Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to each of you to Intentional Conversations VodCast. We're just giving it a few moments for members of our community to get settled into this virtual learning space. I am Dr. Nika White, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am your host. And I am so delighted to welcome you to today's episode. I invite you now just to take a moment to go to the chat. Let us know where you are joining the conversation from. And if you feel inclined to also be connected with this community beyond this hour of time together today, then also share your LinkedIn information. That lets us know that you are willing for this community to connect with you and to remain in touch. And I also very much welcome connecting with each of you. So I will have my team to share my LinkedIn information for you into the chat as well. And for those of you who are joining us via LinkedIn Live, welcome. We're so glad that you're here as well. We do also go live on LinkedIn every Friday during this hour for those that do not register in advance. And so however in which you're joining the conversation today, we are delighted. Don't worry if you are joining us by LinkedIn Live. My team is watching closely the comment section, and we're bringing in all of those sentiments into the Zoom community as well, so we all can be connected as one. At NWC, we really do value disability inclusion. And with that in mind, we do have closed caption that has been enabled today for those who may need it or benefit from it. So wanted to put that into your hearing. And welcome again. We still have folks that are coming in. So we're just continuing to welcome in our virtual community. Welcome again. Happy Friday to everyone. We're sharing in the chat where we're joining the conversation from. I will let you know that I am joining the conversation today from the DR, where I have been the past week on a mission trip with my family, as well as my church family. Lots of folks are coming in. Okay, so I see Charlotte, North Carolina is being represented in the chat. Shout out your cities. Let us know where you're joining the conversation from today. It always is a treat for us to see the different geographies that are represented. And not just in the United States, but also in other countries as well. So welcome to each of you. We don't take it lightly when people decide to spend this hour with us. I want to give a special shout out right now to the NWC team for helping every single week to divide and conquer as we bring this virtual learning experience to the broader community. This is our way of showing up and holding space for individuals that desire to learn with and from others as we deepen our knowledge and understanding of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, justice, all the things that fall under the broad umbrella of DEI. I also want to let you know that while every single week we are incredibly excited to bring you intentional conversations where we engage with a diverse group of guests so they can share their unique perspectives on our topic of DEI and leadership in business. Please note that the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect those of NWC. This is our commitment to foster a growth mindset. And in doing so, we truly believe that it's essential to explore a wide range of ideas and approaches to DEI. So I wanted to make sure I put that into your hearing. Okay, let's get started. Again, thank you for joining Intentional Conversations VodCast. Enjoy the show. Let the conversations begin, indeed, and that is precisely what we're about to do. So if you're just joining us, you have joined Intentional Conversations VodCast, and I am Dr. Nika White, your host. So excited to welcome you all here today. At NWC, we love to share information that helps us all to really lean into our learning journey of deepening our understanding of different cultures and backgrounds. And so we are still in the month of May, although we're at the end of May. I do want to let you know that this month we have been recognizing and celebrating AAPI Heritage Month, which is Asian American Pacific Islander Month. And so this gives me a chance to let you know that just because May is going to be ending in a few days does not mean that we need to stop standing in solidarity and showing support for the AAPI community. So make sure that that becomes a part of your pledge and devotion going forward as well. May was also and is also Mental Health Awareness Month. And so this is one topic that we cannot forget about. We have to make sure that we're doing our part to break the stigma and ensure that we're talking about it every single month because it is just that important to each of us. Now, June, when we celebrate June, there's a couple different national observances that take place, one of which is Pride Month. And so I want to make sure we put that into your hearing. This is a time for all of us to stand in solidarity with the members of the LGBTQIA plus community. So find ways to learn more, to be able to find support of those individuals that are contributing such great ways to our community. And if you haven't already secured your speaker for Juneteenth, I want you to know that NWC is ready to be able to specially curate a meaningful experience for you and your organization. So call us up. No judgment about being last minute. We know that June is upon us, but we'd love to help ensure that you are recognizing Juneteenth in a very meaningful way. Freedom is something that we all can align with. And so I would love to be able to come and share with your organization. Now, if you've been a part of our community for some time, you know that we also take the content from our VodCast and we extract it and make it available in a podcast capacity. So for those of you who know of friends and associates, coworkers who like to get their content in a podcast capacity, let them know not to worry. They can always catch all of our episodes anywhere they like to get their podcasts. So make sure that you're subscribing today and you're encouraging others to do the same. And do you happen to know of someone that would make a great guest co-host for our Intentional Conversations podcast? If so, let us know. We also are super encouraged when we get testimonials and feedback, how much people are learning and growing through this community. So if you're one of those individuals, we're going to place right now in the comment section of LinkedIn Live and in the chat a survey that we will also post again at the end of today's hour. And we just invite you to take 2 minutes to give us your take on how beneficial has Intentional Conversations been for you. We would potentially like to use that also in our marketing communications. And again, as I shared, if you have some recommendations, we are now looking for Q3 and Q4. You can contact my colleague, Amora Carter at amora@nikawhite.com. Many of our recommendations have come from this community. And so we honor and we really do appreciate when you all share thoughts of amazing people in your network that can add value to this podcast community. Just want to also share with you that one of the things we're doing at NWC is we're increasing the ways in which we're getting word out about some of our offerings to the broader community. And so we've started sending, or we're planning for a campaign right now to add as many of those who would like to be on our text list to receive information from us in that way. We won't inundate you, but we do want to make sure that you can get the information that we are offering when you need it and in a way that's accessible to you. So scan that QR code and sign up, and we'd love to add you to our list. Now, it does me great pleasure to be able to give you a heads up for what you have to look forward to in upcoming months as it relates to our guest co-host. We have joining us Nirupa Netram, and she's going to be joining us the first Friday in June. So she's kicking off the month. She is an excellent practitioner in this space, and I hope that you will schedule time to be here with us on that date. We have Abby Adamson that's going to be joining us the 14th of March, and she has tremendous content. And again, another great advocate in the space of justice and inclusion and equity. So join us for that conversation on the 14th of June. And then we have Dr. Nicole Price. She has an amazing book out, and I cannot wait for you all to be able to meet with her. She is a fellow Forbes Books author, and so I know that that's going to be a treat for each of us to be in community with her. Now, last but not least is today's guest co-host, so we're going to spend the rest of our time on. And I want to, as I normally do, give an official intro. It's always my desire to make sure that our podcast community understands the context and the experience, the accolades, the credentials in which our guest co-hosts show up to our conversation. So today is no different. I'm going to read her full bio, and then I will invite her to greet this audience in her own way. And today we are welcoming Casey Ariel Thobias. She is the founder and CEO of Blaze Group, a technology firm that adapts AI to cultivate Black women entrepreneurs. Casey started Blaze Group in December of 2020 after spending a decade structuring multi-billion loans for tech companies, but never seeing other Black women on deal teams or the receiving end of funding. She left to take her knowledge and passion to the streets. Blaze Group was created to decolonize pathways to economic freedom. The company brings deep familiarity and user-centric experiences to capacity building frameworks for Black women entrepreneurs. Today, Blaze Group has an engaged audience of more than 110,000 Black women entrepreneurs and supporters around the globe. Blaze means building leaders and accepting zero excuses. Casey is also heavily engaged in financial activism and advisory. From the United States to Sub-Saharan Africa, Casey has designed innovative solutions across diverse sectors to tackle systemic disparities and promote racial and gender equity. She serves on the advisory boards of Kiva US and Village Micro Fund, and also provides management consulting to mid to large-scale social enterprises. By leveraging her deep understanding of financial analysis, risk management, strategic planning, Casey helps startups and nonprofits streamline project execution, pilot innovative solutions, and achieve increased scale. Casey Ariel is happily married and is primarily based in Nairobi, Kenya, though she and her partner travel the globe quite frequently for entrepreneurial engagements and pleasure. She is currently joining the conversation in Alabama. I should share that with you. She grew up in Gadsden, South Carolina, my home state, and is an alumni of the University of South Carolina, which she and I also share in common. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so that I can bring Casey into view, adding her to the spotlight. And you all know what to do, community, podcast community. I want you to now find those accolades, find those credentials, find whatever it is that you want to welcome our guest co-host today with, and place them into the chat, emojis, whatever it is that's coming to mind for you. And let's let Casey know that we're just so grateful for her to be with us today. And Casey, before I release you to join in the conversation and to greet the audience in your own way, we have a tradition here, and that is to ask our guest co-host to share with us, after we've heard your bio, something we would not know about you from hearing your bio, reading your bio, or from looking at your LinkedIn profile. So welcome, my friend. We're so glad you're here. Greet the audience in your own way.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nika, and everyone participating in the space. I feel your energy, even digitally. I will say something that most people wouldn't realize is that I've started my life over 3 times now. I am 34 years old, but I've started my life over 3 times, which is, I'd say, huge for somebody who's a recovering, overachieving, nervous Black girl, right? Who has always strived for this very as close to perfect as possible, as accurate as possible lifestyle. The first time was when I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, working at Bank of America headquarters. I was in this very high pace, upward moving trajectory, and I was abused. First time, almost lost my life though, right? And all of a sudden, stories that we used to laugh at around Big Mama's living room, couches and on her floor and around the fireplace about how her and Big Daddy used to fight, or, she shot him in the butt one time and the bullet is still there, right? Like all of these stories that we hear in our community, it came rushing to me and said, wow, like this doesn't feel good. This is painful, right? Like this is what I've been perpetuating in my cells and through my body. And I made a promise to myself that if I could get out alive, I would start over, right? And that was single-handedly probably the most courageous thing, more courageous than making straight A's, more courageous than being a valedictorian that I could have done for myself, because I walked away from my job and my house that I'd built and my friends, et cetera. And I started my life over in San Francisco, California. And life was grand. It was beautiful. I did not skip a beat in my trajectory. I was even more powerful because of the risks that I was willing to take as a Black woman who was highly visible, because of a lot of the status quo that I would challenge, a lot of the risks that I would take. And then when the pandemic hit, I decided to start my life over again. I was almost being relocated to London in April of 2020, but the pandemic shut everything down in March of 2020, right? And so I made a decision to take myself abroad. And I moved on a one-way flight to Cape Town, South Africa. And I just started over as an entrepreneur. And I said, I want to show Black women that they can be as limitless as they feel. But first, I'm going to start with myself. Right? What happens if I stop trying to change people's minds about how they see me and change the Black woman's mind about how she sees herself? And once again, beautiful things happened. Blaze was born. We've gotten global awards. We've touched over 100,000 lives. We've revolutionized the way finance is done in the ag tech sector on the continent of Africa. And then I found love on the journey again. Right. I got married to a beautiful Tanzanian man, and here I am in the States, like starting over again and creating a completely new idea around legacy. So that's, I think, what people wouldn't realize. It takes a lot of courage to grow up and be who you really are.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much, Casey, for so transparently and vulnerably sharing with our community. I think that that's the best way to give others permission to share their stories as well. There's a time that many of us, and still to this day, where many of us feel reluctant to share because we carry a lot of shame, right? And we feel like that becomes the definition of who we are. And so I love that your story ends with so many great moments of joy that you're continuing to experience and realize every single day. And like you, I just think that's such an important message for Black women all over, because often it's that population that has the hardest time to realize that they deserve joy, right? Especially after some traumatic experiences. And so thank you kindly for sharing. So I want to jump right in, and I want to talk a little bit more about the Blaze group that you started again in December of 2020. And let us know more about your background and how that led you specifically to the Blaze group.
Yes. So as I mentioned, I spent a lot of my career in finance, and it was global corporate and investment banking. And so what that means is we were helping companies that generated revenue of over $2 billion per year, giving them lines of credit, giving them hedge opportunities, helping them acquire the company, et cetera. So I was always working on very complex deals, usually to the tune of multi-billion-dollar loans. And while it was very sexy, right? I got to basically be very creative and engineer solutions that weren't on the market yet. I'd say traditionally on the market. I did not come across a single Black woman, not on my deal teams or in the syndicates across other banks that I was working with. And so it was very clear to me that the knowledge was not making it to my community, right? Communities around the globe for that matter. Nor did I ever give any of this funding to a Black-owned business, right? And so the dollars weren't making it there either. And so when I left to start Blaze, I intentionally aimed for the entrepreneurial ecosystem, because these were businesses I was giving loans to, right? Like these weren't trust funds, right? We weren't on wheels, et cetera. This was the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I decided to start at the base because I really wanted to not just create the solution, but there was a lot of learning to do, right? Because the statistics that we see, the footnotes that are at the bottom of pages that say, oh, and by the way, Black women, only generate an average of $21,000 per year in revenue,
right.
uncontextualized, right? And so I wanted to spend a lot of time with women to understand their stories and their pains and their motivations and a lot of the things that just don't come through in traditional studies. And so over the last, I'd say over 3.5 years, we did a lot. I did a lot of coaching and global immersion programs and summits that are globally recognized, et cetera. And out of that came this AI that is engineered with Big Mama's intelligence, right? Because what I learned and saw is that we have the most degrees, so it's not that, right? We typically work more than 20 years before starting a business. So it's not a lack of experience, right? It's just the lack of familiarity, right? It is the erasure of culture in the business models we're studying, right? The erasure of what we can identify in the case studies that we're trying to make. And so that's how I got there. And now that I am blessed to have so many powerful experiences, now we're in the phase of building frameworks and products, right, that kind of institutionalize or memorialize beyond my lifespan, right? A lot of these things that we're learning and putting into play in the field.
Yeah, so this resonates with me deeply as a fellow Black woman founder. Entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It definitely requires, a commitment to self, belief in self, right? Because there's a lot of no's that come our way, but then there's also those opportunities where people will see us and they will open up a door, and those opportunities are always very welcomed and needed. And so you have, in many ways, created a space for women to feel seen, heard, valued, and like they can have opportunity to serve in entrepreneurship and be successful at it. As I mentioned when I was sharing your bio, BLAZE stands for Building Leaders and Accepting Zero Excuses. And as I think about accepting zero excuses, again, it is so important for us as Black women founders, entrepreneurs, to be of the mindset that we're going to have to overcome those days where excuses are going to show up, right? Excuses that we aren't good enough, excuses that there's racism, excuses that it's even sexism, right? All of the isms, and still do our best to create a space for ourselves and take up that space and then bring other women along with us. And you have, Casey, done that quite brilliantly. And I just want to show appreciation to you for the 110,000 plus women that have been impacted. So thank you so very much. Can you share with us, just from your vantage point, from what you've seen, the importance of entrepreneurship within the Black community and its impact it has had on communities at large, not just our community, but communities at large?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say it's huge. And a lot of the entrepreneurial frameworks we see, we don't call it that, right?
Yep.
So growing up, spending summers in Alabama, this is where my maternal family lives. I would see a lady called Miss Teal almost every single day. I would go there with a nickel with my cousins, and she would give us these freeze cups in styrofoam, little pint or little cups with frozen
Yeah.
Kool-Aid inside. That
Yeah.
was entrepreneurship, but we did not call her an entrepreneur, right?
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
funny when I relay these stories today on Instagram and other platforms, everyone had a Miss Teal. They had a candy lady, right?
Yes.
Folks remember in middle school, the innovative kid would come to school with sugar or Kool-Aid powder and sugar in a Ziploc bag and zip it up and sell it. That
Right.
is entrepreneurship. We didn't call
Right.
it that, right? Even today, as grown adults, we're looking at these other frameworks that we can't relate to, much like is the problem with a lot of SAT frameworks, right? Like when you're
Yes.
describing Johnny being on the yacht, and most students are like, but why is Johnny on the yacht? You've spent a lot of brain power, right? Just trying to understand the context, right? And so I would say Black entrepreneurship is pervasive in our culture. And the more we can tell our own stories using our own language and examples that are
Yeah.
relevant to us, we will be able to see ourselves more readily, right? And find home in it a lot better. And then number two, I'd say it is important that we value our inherent brilliance, even if mainstream media, right, or traditional award shows, et cetera, do not, right? So what we've seen, I'd say in the last 10 years with the rise of social media is we see that big brands, big blue chip brands that have been here for over 100 years, they're starting to take the speak of a Black woman, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a lot more visible. It is actually cool to say sis.
Yes.
It is cool to say what's the T. It is cool, right? Now we've already always said these things, right?
Yes.
But now we're seeing that everyone is gravitating towards it. Meanwhile, many of us, when we go into corporate, myself included, we were trying to scrub it away, right? I was trying to
Yes.
straighten my hair as much as possible to make
Of
folks
course.
comfortable with me, trying to get rid of the residue of my Southern twang, et cetera, right? And so I'm happy we're having a reckoning with that and actually challenging what we're seeing. But I think the cultural misappropriation, I see someone saying that
Mhm.
in the chat. Yes, right. But and us not valuing what is inherently ours, right? And
Yeah.
reaching for goalposts that should just change, right? Like, why do we need to talk about the Oscars not honoring us every single year if it's a feature, not
Mhm.
a framework, not a fealty, not a
Yes.
fear of it, right?
Yeah.
Say all that to say, I think it is time for us to own our brilliance a lot more and get away from regurgitating frameworks that perpetuate bias, that perpetuate these steep learning curves that are not innate to us, and do more to reflect the traditions, the behaviors, the passions of our community. I'll give a very quick example. When I moved to the continent, I started consulting to bootstrap revenue for Blaze, right?
Mhm.
And the first company that I consulted was Hello Tractor. Shout out to Tractor there in Nairobi, Kenya, Uganda, Nigeria, and a few other
Mhm.
countries. And they were looking for someone to create loans for Black folks without bank accounts, right?
Mhm.
That sounds crazy to most people, but someone in my network said, oh, I know just the person, right? And so they introduced me to them.
Yes.
And what I ended up doing was taking a lot of the creativity we use for clients like Uber and Pinterest, folks who were
Yes.
getting millions and millions of dollars of cash, right? They didn't look like us, right? But we were getting
Mhm.
money when they couldn't even figure out quickly how to make profit. I engineered a solution for Black folks without bank accounts, right? That actually worked so well that each of these folks, women and men, got $40,000 to buy a tractor, right? And after 1 year in this scheme, they not only paid back 100% of what they owed, they paid back 107%. And after
Mm.
that, you have banks running to us trying to give more millions of dollars,
Right.
right? Because what I did was I spent time in villages and I didn't say, let me tell you how you change, right? Let me tell you how to hold 20% collateral, et cetera. I said, tell me how we need to change, right? What are you
Yes.
already doing to pay your bills? They were using mobile money. Okay, bet we can use mobile money. We don't need to get you a bank account, right? How often are you getting paid? Well, every time I work a farm, I get paid. Okay, that's how you pay us back. You use this tractor to farm land. You get paid that day. You owe us back every week, right? Just these small things, right?
Yeah.
Listen better. I strongly believe we can just reflect what already is and scale that.
I love that. I love the example because it helps to make it plain that oftentimes the reason that the answer is no is because we failed to use that level of creativity and innovation and finding workarounds, based upon what's happening within those communities. And so, it just goes to show that we often conform to mainstream way of thinking, and mainstream way of thinking has never been set up for Black people to really succeed. And so, those concessions are not only a necessity, but it's also helping to better all communities, because those individuals not only paying back those loans, they're also creating jobs and now inspiring other people to want to go and follow their path and do the same thing. So I absolutely love the work that you have been able to do and that you continue to do. So let's talk about this important study that your group, Blaze, has launched. And it is where you're about to launch it. So I'm going to let you kind of give a little bit of what the purpose of it's for, what you're hoping to, that the results and that we can glean from it will do. But the study is on the state of Black women-owned businesses. Can you give us a preview of what you hope to uncover in this report?
Yes, absolutely. So, the State of Black Women-Owned Businesses is our annual report. This is our third year doing it, and we actually mature and I think get a lot better at mirroring back what our people want to see in it. So this year is special in that we're going to continue um, providing better context around the experiences of Black women entrepreneurs. So what you'll typically see is the average revenue that Black women entrepreneurs generate. You'll typically see that we raise less than 1% of venture capital each year, but you don't necessarily see that 75% of us are mothers, right? Or you
Yeah.
don't necessarily see that more than 70% of us never made it to a mid-level management or higher position before we entered
Mhm.
entrepreneurship. And so managing a budget, hiring and firing, like all of these things we don't even have the reps
Yes.
for, even with the degree. So last year, 81% of survey participants had at least a college degree, right? So all of these nuances, right? We put this data together to draw conclusions, which tell a story, but then beyond that, to give insights, right, to
Yeah.
different industries to say, hey, maybe if you leaned into these things, which are second nature, right? Or maybe if you
Yeah.
solve these problems, because obviously money is a problem, but there's so many other problems. What happens when less than 1/4 of Black women entrepreneurs are not in a professional network? And so there is no way for them to have referrals, right?
Yeah.
We try to give a lot of rich data that show openings for solutions so that the rest of the market can engineer solutions that what we call in tech is like being user centric, right? Like how
Yeah.
do the features, how do the products actually reflect the normal behaviors, the normal patterns of the demographic you're trying to serve versus just building a product and telling people to reach higher to touch.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And when you think about some of the biggest challenges that Black women entrepreneurs face today, name some of those. I know there's plenty. We could be here all day, but maybe let's name the top, two or three, and then discuss the specific ways, in addition to what you've already shared, that Blaze is able to help address those challenges.
Yeah, so the top one unequivocally is lack of funding.
Mhm.
Um, People I think would be surprised to know that less than 2% of Black women entrepreneurs have successfully crowdfunded, received grants, or
Yeah,
even have received business loans. And so we're not even talking about venture capital where they have to prove they can grow really fast, or angel
right,
investors where you have to be in these rooms. Like, we're talking about
right.
some of the most seemingly common and seemingly attainable sources of cash, right?
Yeah,
Um, and so I think that continues to be a very fragmented industry as it relates to capital for Black women entrepreneurs. Because even when you apply for grants, hearing about them is very hard. These firms typically don't have the advertising dollars to make, the application windows just visibly
right,
seen. They can only say yes to a handful, even if thousands apply.
right.
So I think a few things that are just low hanging fruit, right? People who are in um, the banking industry, right? If a Black woman opens a bank account at a community bank or a regional bank or a national bank, it is very unlikely that they will know that they are supposed to have a business banker, an assigned banker that they can just call and have conversations with and build
Right,
relationship with. They will
right,
not know to ask, but banks are not giving that information willingly either.
right.
They're opening the account, they're taking the maintenance fee, and they're just, right? It's just as quiet as I'm being right now, right? So those in the financial sector, I would say it is important from the inside to really push your institutions to do what they're supposed to do, and that is to lean in a lot more and tell folks that they have these features available to them for free. They have these relationships available to them for free. And to let folks, even by word of mouth, know, right? Like, if you have a bank account somewhere as a business owner, you are supposed to have a business banker. And the importance of that
Absolutely.
relationship is finance is a warm handoff industry. It's a warm handshake industry. It is not the application portal that gets the best folks through. It is 100% who you know, and do I trust you based on what I've seen. Right. But the business banker will be that internal advocate for you and explain things, right, that their colleagues might have never seen in terms of business model and what the products are and the behaviors of the demographic, et cetera. So I think that's very low hanging fruit that a lot of people don't do. I'd say folks who are in the service industry, I don't see folks using what's called receivables financing enough. And all that is
Mm,
if you have an invoice that is due, um, some companies do this up to 60 days before you're expecting to get it. You can actually sell that invoice to a
yeah,
financial institution for something as little as 2% or
and
3%
get your money sooner.
and get your 97% early, right? And then once,
Mhm.
once that person pays the invoice, they're just paying it back to that financial institution. And the
Yeah,
client will never know, right? But that's a very easy
yeah,
way to get 5 figures, 6 figures by using that versus these term loans that are harder to pay, right? It's just very short
yeah.
windows. But the second biggest thing, and I will say shout out to spaces that are innovating this space and
Mhm,
trying
mhm.
to consolidate solutions a little better. So Kiva is an example. Kiva is a crowdfunding
Yeah.
platform. You have Kickstarter, et cetera. But the second thing is mental health, right? And that is not being quantified enough.
Mm,
4 out of 5 folks in entrepreneurship report elevated stress levels and anxiety levels in entrepreneurship. And if you think about that being sustained over very long periods of time, we already know bad things happen. Our health is damaged because of it. Relationships are damaged because of it. Our cells, right? Even at a molecular level, like, things really do change in our bodies, and we can enter things like depression that are harder to shake. So I just finished reading a fellow Gamecock's book called The Space, or by the time you read this, The Space Between Chesley's Smile and Her Mind, or something like that. Excuse me if I'm misquoting the end of the title, but she told a beautiful story about winning Miss USA, right? But it was a lot harder for her to tell the stories around how painful it was to
of
exist in
course.
these cycles of silent suffering, right? And
Yeah.
I think we have to do a better job of practicing articulating what these challenges are and how painful they truly are, and and try to unpack what does it look like to live in the Black mundane. That is something that Dominic Davis or Midori Davis challenges us to think about. She's a writer for TechCrunch, but like, what does the Black, if we believe that Black exceptionalism is toxic, right? And it doesn't really get us to
Right.
these levels of safety that we thought it did. What does the Black mundane look like, right? Like let's
Mhm.
unpack that. Like what do we really want if we weren't afraid of being judged? Like how many hours do we really want to work, right? How much money do we really need to be okay? I think we have to start re-engineering what success looks like, and shrinking the time from T0 start to finish to be in better situations.
Yeah. Well, okay, so you said so much in that last clip that I want us to pause and kind of lean into a bit more. Certainly, I mean, I have in my years spent a lot of time working with many different minority-owned businesses, helping them to scale, grow, build capacity, and to just bridge that learning curve. Just because many times when people go into business, specifically a lot of minority individuals, they do so because they have a passion for their craft or their trade and they're really good at it. But that does not necessarily mean that they have the business acumen to know how to scale and grow. And so there's definitely some opportunities from a standpoint of bridging the gap of the learning curve. And so for me, as you were sharing what was coming up, is the importance of community, especially also when you name that number two challenge is the mental health. You said 4 out of 5, and I'm not sure if that's like the general population, but if we were to break that down by minority individuals or Black women specifically, that's probably really, really high. And so we aren't really meant to operate in silos and to isolate ourselves from community. I think community is what helps us to know that we're not alone, and also to build that sense of camaraderie when we need someone to encourage us on those hard days. Um, and so I just love all that you're bringing to this conversation. Um, we are going to be shifting momentarily to take questions from our audience. And so as you percolate on any curiosities that are coming up for you and you would like to share your comments or questions, I'm going to invite you, if you're part of the Zoom community, to use the raise hand feature that lets me know that you're willing to be called upon, and invited to unmute yourself and add it to the spotlight to share. If you are here listening in and you do have some curiosities, then place them into the chat. We're happy to take those on your behalf and present them as time permits. And then, of course, for our LinkedIn Live audience, go to the comment section. We're watching that closely, and we want to make sure we can address all of your questions. But so while you're kind of percolating on that, I want to go to my next question. And this is a big one, and it's something that I don't think we talk about enough. And so, Casey, this relates to the tension points that often exist between changing societal perceptions about Black women and helping Black women change their self-perception. So how do you navigate and address this tension through your work?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'd say we can't do it without relationship, right? So a lot of the pressures we receive as business owners and as folks that want to be fundable, right, is the importance of scale and growth, and like how many folks can you pack into this product so that you're as profitable as possible and de-risk the financial system. But there's a trade-off to scale, if we be honest, right? Which is why Bank of America is a transactional business, right? It is not,
Yeah.
they can't have relationships with everyone, right? And community banks tend to be relational, right? And so going back to your question around whether we change folks' perception of Black women versus changing Black women's minds about themselves, the truth, at least from what I found in this journey thus far, is that that latter piece takes time.
Mhm.
It requires trust. It requires
Mhm.
repetition. You're literally trying
Yeah,
to you're literally trying to heal decades,
absolutely.
right, of experiences that said otherwise, right? And so in our work, even as we lean into AI, which is highly scalable, you're talking about software that just duplicates itself every time somebody subscribes. Even as we do that, we lend a very, very close ear to what our community is saying, how they're responding. If anyone wants to reach me directly, and that means I have to give time to that, right? They know exactly where to find me. We hold focus groups very, very often. I check in on my folks and hold these small kind of update sessions, if you will, around just what's happening in the market, what's happening in their world, because it is hard to scale relationship, but eventually, where I'm hoping we get to the point, and I believe at around year 5, we can do this very responsibly after paying enough attention. The hope is to scale culture, right? And what I mean by that is, instead of it being Casey that's having to sit in these seats and learn, absorb, and synthesize what I'm learning to change data into theory and theory into culture, right? We're aiming to get to the point where we can deposit the good inside of communities so that they can save themselves, right? So there's one day not even a need for Blaze to come in and fix it, or a need for Blaze to be the only, right?
Oh,
A
exactly.
lot of other players. And so for eventually that will look like us partnering with coffee shops, just these everyday third spaces, these stoops where people just love to hang out. And it's not about being exceptional in school or exceptional at work or an exceptional mom at home, right? But really partnering with folks that are these safe, soft, sacred places, and figuring out how we can scale our cultures inside of communities, right? In ways that provide that support without it feeling like a stretch, and provide that support without it feeling like folks are having to erase who they are to be exceptional. So that we can, over time, because it will take years for this thing to work, but so that we can over time really heal the woman herself, and her success is a byproduct of that healing.
Yeah, I mean, time is definitely a factor in this, because we are trying to undo years and years and years of trauma that plays a role in self-perceptions of Black women. And so, I feel like it is a both and. I do believe that part of the self-perception can be benefited if societal's perception was, one that was more consistently positive of Black women. And so, I think that we need a parallel path, and we need strategies that allow for both, areas to be addressed, effectively. And so I'm not seeing any hands raised right now, so I'm going to keep going with my next question, because we have referenced AI a couple of times today, Casey, and that is something that I'm also really closely connected with right now. Many in this community know that I released a LinkedIn learning course earlier this year, and it was how navigating the intersection of DEI and AI. And while I believe that AI is incredibly powerful, it's here to stay. It has much great potential to help bridge the gap of opportunity, I believe, for people that may need some extra support and help. But its effectiveness has everything to do with the ethical nature in which people are developing and engaging and deploying these tools. And so I would love for you to talk a little bit about, because I know that you're really into the space of technology. What are you seeing from your vantage point? And what do you feel like some of those developers maybe are not hearing that you want to amplify in this conversation?
Yeah. I have to start by giving homage to very visible Black women who are being champions of
Yes,
what
yes.
ethics looks like, and like how we name it, and being very specific. I'm reading a book currently by Joy Buolamwini. The book is called Unmasking AI. She's an MIT grad. And when she was in school, she was also enamored with AI. And she noticed that when she got in front of the camera for facial recognition, it couldn't see her because she was darker skinned, right?
Yeah.
So she was being funny, and she grabbed like a ski mask or something, like this very white mask, and put it in front of her. I mean, like literally like pale white, right?
Yes, yes.
And it could see it, right? And so that sent her down this path around unpacking AI and ethics and diversity and inclusion, and all these things. And a lot of her work led to police agencies fixing their recognition patterns so that they did not incorrectly incarcerate folks or put them in harm's
Right.
way, and in companies that are creating facial recognition for autonomous driving vehicles to be able to see humans that are dark skinned. Otherwise, they would not slow down and put folks in harm's
Right.
way, and so many other things, right? But number one, I think as a whole, there needs to be a lot more care put towards the ghost workers around AI, because AI does not learn what is bad or good, what is harmful or sacred on its own. There are people
Yeah.
that go in and tag every
Right.
single thing that could possibly come in from the internet. I mean, from the dark,
Mhm.
dark, nasty parts of the world to the web to the beautiful
Right.
things. And so for ChatGPT, um, a lot of the work that was done right before this became a consumer product was in Kenya. Some folks in Kenya
Mhm.
were paid less than $2 a day
Mhm.
to go
Yeah.
through and tag the nasty stuff. That did not happen in the US, right? And these
Mhm.
folks had mental illnesses, they were struggling, they did not receive the support, the clinical support that they
Yeah.
were asking for on the job. It was just about getting this thing tagged and good so we could go to market. And that is still happening today. And the folks that are doing the tagging and the labeling and the coding I'm not talking about like Python coding. I mean, literally, like, this is marketing, this is Tuesday, this is green.
Right.
These are very low wage workers. And there's not a lot of attention, praise, or care given at this base level. And I think that there needs to be more regulation and parameters
Yeah.
around how that happens, because it's not cheap just because
Yeah.
it's cheap.
Absolutely.
It's cheap because people are being exploited. So that's one big thing. And then I'd say for everyone that is engineering, it's just important to remember that um, as the programmer, your desires, your aspirations, and your biases are being programmed into these machines. So something we're seeing from a lot of these platforms is different advice is given to Black folks, right? Than white folks. I mean, just so many
Yeah.
nuances, right, around what to reach for and how to go about it.
Yeah.
And so I would say having a third party, right? Having someone to check your bias, having an objective party to really balance and weigh and give feedback throughout the process. I use my community a lot to co-create the solution for Blaze.
Absolutely.
The mentors that I have don't look like me. I'll give a quick example of that. I was talking to a mentor of mine, a white male that comes from the finance industry. I said, "Yeah, my boss name is Bianca," and I keep talking, and he's like, "I'm sorry, I didn't hear anything after Bianca," and I'm like, "What do you mean?" And I'm annoyed, right? I'm like, he just doesn't get it, right? He says, "Did you not know that Bianca means white?" And he said, "That's a very common name in Germany." And he's schooling me, right, on Europe. Like, and so the reason that you like that name, the reason that you got that name is akin to slave masters giving Black people their last names,
Mhm.
right? Like, and so now she is called B, right? So just the visibility, right? Like, not doing these things in silos and by yourself, but really having checks and balances and having an openness to feedback keeps a lot of people safer.
Yeah.
It's a long road.
Yeah, and safe is precisely the right word to use there, because there's a lot of harm that's being created when those practices, like who are you bringing in to be those thought partners when you're beta testing, when you're developing the content, all of that is incredibly important. So I'm so glad you're bringing this to the conversation. I will ask my team, for any of you that are interested in the LinkedIn Learning Course, because I do give several strategies that align with some of what Casey is sharing today. I would love for you to check out the LinkedIn Learning Course on navigating the intersection of DEI and AI. Important conversation we need to continue to have. Okay, so I want to go to my next question. And what I want to talk about now is something that you referenced earlier as we were talking about the importance of being innovative in solutioning for challenges that a lot of individuals have, particularly marginalized communities. And so when you talk about the importance of designing innovative solutions that integrate seamlessly, Casey, into the lives of marginalized communities, such as many of those that you have had the opportunity to serve, can you share an example of such a solution that the Blaze Group has developed or supported?
Absolutely. So we have an app today that's on Android and iOS called Blaze Group, right? So it's the Blaze Group app, and through it, we're in 176 countries today, which is very important to me because America is, of course, not the center of the universe, right?
Yes.
And as we aim to touch the diaspora, right, there are so many folks around the world that are similarly marginalized, right? And so living on the continent for 3.5 years, what I saw was that laptops are actually not ubiquitous, right? Like most folks don't have that, but they
Yeah.
more commonly have cell phones, right? That was
Yes.
very eye-opening for me, right? And so as I thought about, you know, closing the gap, the opportunity gap between world-class knowledge, right, and the majority of folks that will have small businesses, accessibility was very important, right? And so I could house my curriculum on web-based portals like most of my peers in America are doing, but I've intentionally made them micro dosage learning education and these two-way conversations that can be had with an AI business advisor named B, because I do want it to be accessible in villages in Kenya, in Nigeria, and in other places. And so I'm paying close attention to you know, how well our content performs in areas of poor connectivity to the web,
Yeah.
right? Like, do I need to make the file sizes smaller? Do I need to use less pictures or more words, right? Like, I'm paying attention to those things, and
Yeah.
folks are folks offshore outside of the US are buying our subscriptions are using our app, et cetera. But just the modality is an example of how we're being very conscious and thoughtful. And we did sunset our academy that was web-based so that we can really drive all behavior on an app and just learn, right? Because I don't need them to have what I want them to have. I want them to have what they need, right? And so testing, observing, listening, iterating is a huge part of how we do what we do, which is why I say eventually, you know, even I'm not rushing past the relational piece that has to happen before we scale it, before we scale culture, because I want to learn how we make world-class knowledge truly accessible to across sub-Saharan Africa, right? Across the most marginalized and rural places in America, and do little harm, right? And the last thing I'll say is affordability is a big piece too, right? Like our data shows us that the vast majority of entrepreneurs that are early stage make less than $10,000 per year, right? That's less than $1,000 per month.
Yeah.
So I don't need them giving me, you know, 10% of their income just to learn, right? And so a cell phone is cheaper than a laptop, but a $9.99 subscription is cheaper than a $1,000, you know, coaching package,
Right.
those types of things.
Right. Yeah, I can tell there's lots of intentionality and how you move, Casey, and how you make decisions around supporting, you know, those who you have identified as your target audience. You said something a moment ago, and then you just kept rolling. And I'm like, we have to go back to it. You said, I don't need them to have what I want them to have. I want them to have what they need. And that's so powerful to me. You know, I shared at the top of the hour that I'm joining the conversation today from the DR, where I've been on this mission trip all week long, and we've been going to the bateys, serving food, and I think that the mentality sometimes is that yes, we want people to have what we want them to have instead of really digging deep to interrogate questions and getting the research to understand what really are the needs and how can we meet those needs instead of showing up in a way that we feel like just makes us feel good, you know? And so I think that's really important. And it amplifies the fact that even in entrepreneurship, there is a way to do that, right? And so, you know, as we talk about social entrepreneurs, for those social entrepreneurs who aim to create solutions that are both innovative and accessible, like the solution that you just shared with us, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, please re-engineer the status
Re-engineer.
quo.
Yes, re-engineer. I have your app, by the way. I wanted to share that too. So let's make sure we kind of share information about the app into the chat if we can. Re-engineer. Say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I often see the smartest and the brightest and the highest performing ex-corporate folks come into entrepreneurship and regurgitate everything they learned, right? And it's not helpful, right? Like if those solutions were able to be copied and pasted into, our communities, it would have worked by now, right? I think we have a responsibility to take the brilliance that we have and be willing to start from the ground up, right? Like, how do we decompose everything we thought we knew and actually co-create with our communities, right? If we're building something for the elderly, right, who did not know how to deposit into their 401ks and they're left a little short, like, how do we start there, right? Like how do we make the most practical sense of what we're hearing from them, and flatten the learning curve for them? I don't see that happening enough. I see a lot of folks coming from finance kind of telling folks, you need to save 20% collateral. You need to make sure that you have your credit score at this level and all these things. Meanwhile, you have payday loans showing up beside every single gas station, high traffic
Right.
areas, right? They're giving
Right.
out the water bottles. I don't see like they're making sure they're accessible, that they're there on payday, that they're there, yeah, I would just love to see us re-engineer, and that means that you have to let go of ego, because you will be wrong many times, right? Like,
Right.
if it is really about the collective and not the individual, how can you sit and learn and be taught by
Right.
who's the people who seem to be the lowest among us, even if it takes longer? Because blessed is the person who plants trees whose shade they may never sit under. Blessed is the
Absolutely.
person who plants trees whose shade
Absolutely.
they may never sit under.
That's so good. So good. Thank you so much, Casey. Okay, so I'm going to try to squeeze one more question in before I'll let you have the final remarks to close the audience out, in whatever way that feels appropriate to you. But I've talked a lot about your pathway, and it has significantly included work in the financial activism and advisory realm. So how do you define financial activism, and why is it important in today's economic climate?
Yeah, I define it as intentionally and visibly challenging the status quo in finance. That's it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like raising the voice and being solution oriented, around alternatives, right, to what we're already
Mhm.
doing. And it's very important right now because lending rates are increasing. And so for business owners, that means what might have cost a person 10%, it could very easily cost them 20%, right? In terms
Right.
of borrowing. Inflation is on the rise. And so what might have cost someone $3 to make a candle might easily cost them $7 today, right? And when they drive up their prices, it impacts their customers, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so the access, to capital is just at such a height right now. But folks aren't making more money, right? Like, there hasn't been this magical switch where people have more money to spend. They have less money to spend, right? Their
Mhm.
bills are higher. They have less
Yeah.
discretionary income. And so financial activism is important right now because people who look like me, people who look like you, anyone that is diverse, right? You are in rooms that these decision makers are not in. That is your competitive advantage. That is your secret sauce, right? Like, you are privy to conversations and needs and solutions and innovative things that are happening, not at scale, but just, episodically in communities that have not made it to ivory towers, right? Or wherever you might be having conversations. And so, advocacy and activism can look like just bubbling up these frameworks, or championing for someone in the communities where your office is in, coming inside and just spending an hour like eating and talking and learning and understanding, so that
Mhm.
this re-engineering can happen. And I think I know, actually, there is just so much brilliance and ingenuity happening every day outside of television screens and captured on social media posts, that can very easily be amplified, much like I've done time and time again in my career. And I just want to see a lot more people taking those risks,
Mhm.
and mentoring up a lot more to make changes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So well said. So we have maybe 2 minutes left, and I want to thank this community for showing up today as you do week after week. I also want to extend a very special appreciation to you, Casey, for sharing with us so many great insights and for your work and your leadership that you're doing. And I want to give you the opportunity to close us out in a way for you to share any other insights that are coming up for you that you have a lot of energy around that maybe you haven't been able to socialize with this community. What would you like to leave us with?
Well, one, if anyone happens to be an entrepreneur, a Black woman entrepreneur, well, kudos to being an entrepreneur. But
There you go.
we've launched the survey for this year's State of Black Women-Owned Businesses report, and we are listing the businesses of every single company that participates in this and co-creates this with us this year. So you can participate by going to blazegroup.io/survey, blazegroup.io/survey. What your input will help folks re-engineer and reimagine what solutions for you can look like. So please do participate. And then lastly, I'll ask you the question. I'll ask anyone listening the question. What would you do if you were not afraid?
That is a great question to leave us with to ponder. And I know that I'm going to do it this weekend. What would you do if you were not afraid? Thank you so much, Casey. Wishing you all a safe and wonderful weekend, and hope to see you back next week for another episode of Intentional Conversations VodCast. Thanks for joining us today. Bye-bye.